to welcome everyone to the League of Women Voters of Salt Lake February General Meeting. My name is Donnie and I am the League of Women Voters of Salt Lake Program Director. Thank you for attending this study presented by the League of Women Voters of Utah. And we thank the League of Women Voters of Utah for presenting this important study on Utah abortion laws, an in-depth look at Utah's legislative bill and how they affect Utah women's right to health care in Utah. I now turn the time over to Nikki Nelson to introduce the panel.
Thank you, Donnie. I am Nikki Nelson and leader of the study. And I'm going to introduce my team one by one and have them tell a little bit about why they wanted to participate in the study. And but first, just a little bit of administrative stuff. We have the question and answer interface open. If you have questions, if you'll just type them into the Q&A, and we'll get to them at the end of the program and go through as many as we can in the time allotted. We also have the chat room open. So there are two messages there right now. One is a welcome. And if you just have a statement to make, you can put that on the chat box. But we also have a link to the study. Some of you may not have had time yet to read the study, but I hope if you haven't, will intrigue you enough that you'll go back and read it. It's on the League website. And as many of you know, doing a study is a lot of work, and it's always more work than you think it will be. And this one came about because at the convention, the 2020 convention, that's when we choose the studies that the League will do for the year. And Emily Walsh suggested that somebody do a study on Utah's abortion laws. And I thought, what a great idea. And then I realized that if it was going to be done, I at least had to participate. And I ended up volunteering to lead that study. And I did it for two reasons. I have spent a lot of time in the Legislative Action Group, listened to a lot of committee discussion on abortion bills, and they are very frustrating. The testimony can be very frustrating because a lot of it is just factually incorrect. It's myths and just things that are not true about abortion. The second reason was in 2020, a bill was passed that will prohibit all abortions in Utah, excepting in cases of rape or incest or severe physical damage to the woman. And that bill actually passed, and it is predicated upon a court of authority allowing the states to choose their abortion and to choose to prohibit abortion. And when Senator McKay passed that bill, it was kind of the last straw. Okay, we need to really look at what our legislator is doing about privacy, a woman's privacy, and a woman's choice of healthcare. And that's why I got involved in the study. And one of the next member of my team is Vicki Samuelson, and I'll have her tell why she got involved in this study.
Okay. Thank you, Nikki. I basically got involved in the study along the same lines as what Nikki did. It seems like women are under attack with all of these bills that are coming around, and we're losing any ground that we have made because it's broadening out in the scope of things that in women's healthcare. And I just think it's really unconscionable for them to disrespect us the way that they're disrespecting us. And that's what I think they're doing. So that's why I jumped onto this study, because I really wanted to see really what the history was and how the bills have gone up and down through the years. And I found it very interesting and very telling. So that was the reason why I got started in it.
Thank you. And Tina?
Hi. I listened to Emily and Vicky and Nikki discuss the increase in abortion legislation in 2020, and I wanted to know more about current abortion opposition. Why now? Why the move from the health of the woman to a focus on the fetus? I chose to study and report on Senate Bill 67, the Disposition of Fetal Remains, which passed in 2020 and is now Utah law. The study on abortion laws was my first exposure to following the legislature and the legislative process on a bill, and also being a participant in a league study. I highly recommend that you participate in league studies. I had lots of questions, and I wasn't an expert, but being involved in a study is really, really important and so educational. So I highly recommend taking a look at next year's studies and seriously consider becoming a participant in those studies.
Thanks, Tina. And Kathy?
Yes, I'm Kathy Bealey, and I think my participation was born out of frustration. You know, it's interesting living in Utah, particularly my whole life, where you hear about abortion all the time, and yet I think, okay, didn't we just have a law passed last session? So now we're having another one. What we've discovered is eye-opening, that many of these laws are conflicting. It was really very interesting. So thank you.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to talk about three of the bills that we looked at. Maybe I should say Vicky went through the history and status. We went through 4 bills in detail, that fairly recent bills that addressed abortion. We met with 2 physicians from the University of Utah that provide abortions, and we also met with Planned Parenthood, who, as you know, also are one of the few groups in Utah that provide abortion. We took a look at the anti-abortion websites, and I think that's about all we did on the study. So I want to talk about 3 of the bills that we looked at in detail. And Angelina Betia was not able to come tonight. She was an important member of our study. And the bill she looked at in detail is SB 234 from 2016. It's called Protecting Unborn Children Amendments. And it was sponsored by Senator Bramble from Utah County and Representative Stratton from Orem, which I think is also in Utah County. The point of this bill was to require anesthesia for abortions after 20 weeks. Now, there are abortions after 20 weeks for lethal fetal defects and for protecting the life of the mother. But there was a long discussion in Senate and House committees and on the floor about, do fetuses feel pain during an abortion? So this bill passed into law. It doesn't specify the type of anesthesia, and it's contradictory in that if there is, for example, an abortion resulting from rape, it doesn't require anesthesia in those cases. So the interesting thing about this bill is that the enforcement is up to the provider. And when we, Tina and Kathy may talk more about this, but the legislature does not hover over abortion providers to determine what kind of anesthesia is provided, which is a good thing. I personally listened to 2 other bills. The one I mentioned in 2020, Senate Bill 174, sponsored by Senator McKay, who's from Riverton, and co-sponsored by Representative Lisenby, who's from Clearfield. And this, as I mentioned, totally prohibits abortion if, and I quote, a court of a binding authority holds that abortion may be prohibited by a state. But it also excludes rape, incest, substantial and irreversible impairment of major bodily function of the mother, death of the mother, are lethal fetal defects. And surprisingly, this bill did not receive a lot of discussion, either in the Senate or House committees or on the floor of the House and Senate. And it pretty well sailed through. I believe all Republicans in both the House and the Senate voted to make this bill law. And it is law right now. If the Supreme Court should overturn Roe versus Wade, for example, and open it up to be a state decision, abortion would be prohibited in Utah with those exceptions. The other bill that really got to me, just in terms of annoyance, was House Bill 364 in 2020, called Abortion Revisions. It was sponsored by Representative Christiansen. He's from West Jordan, and co-sponsored by Senator Bramble, who again is from Utah County. This started out requiring an extra intervaginal ultrasound and making sure the woman requesting the abortion had to listen to the fetal heartbeat. Fetal heartbeats, or they call it a heart flutter, begin around 6 to 8 weeks in pregnancy. And so the testimony on this bill was so annoying because it was used a lot of emotional terms like little bitty babies' hearts and this little thing with tiny little arms and legs. And the other part that was very annoying was things that are Representative Christiansen and some of the other people testifying were saying things that are not true. One is that abortion is more dangerous than childbirth. It's not. And the rate of deaths from abortion per 100,000 people, and this is abortion at any stage, including late stage abortion, is 0.7 per 100,000. The rate of maternal deaths in Utah due to childbirth is 17 women die of childbirth per 100,000 births. So stating in committee that abortion was more dangerous than childbirth is just not factually correct. There were other statements about most women regret their abortion, which is not true. And there was a lot of personal testimony, kind of heartrending testimony about women who have had an abortion and did have regrets over many years. But the bill was finally amended to get rid of the vaginal ultrasound, because women, both representatives and senators who are female, had had those vaginal ultrasounds and said, excuse me, how painful they were, and that they were just about equivalent to rape. And so that was gotten rid of, turned into an abdominal ultrasound. And then eventually, after lots of testimony in the House and the Senate and back and forth between the House and the Senate, at 7:30 p.m. on the last day of the session, Representative Ward, who's from Bountiful and is a medical doctor and has been very good about supporting medical care while not, I would say, going too far as a pro-choice Republican, which I don't know if he is or not, but he's very good at walking a thin line, pointed out that a abdominal ultrasound, you can't detect the fetal heartbeat until much later in the pregnancy. So if any of you all are in the Ledge Action Group and actually follow committees, again, at 7:30 in the evening, last night of the session, Representative Perry, of all people, who who's a state trooper and usually doesn't get involved in things like this, circled the bill, asked that the bill be circled, and said there was a technical problem with it. And it was circled and it was never uncircled. So that bill did not become law. But one other notable thing about that bill, when it was being discussed in the Senate, and it did pass the Senate, all of the female legislators, female senators walked out of the room. And that made the Salt Lake Tribune. Some of you all may remember that that was quite a headline and photo in the Salt Lake Tribune of Democratic and Republican women walking out of the Senate. So I looked at those two bills in detail, and what did I learn? A lot of false statements, repetitive personal testimony of abortion regrets, a lot of emotional words, pretty much votes along party lines. The only time a few Republicans voted against abortion bills is when it was clear that they would be sued, the state would be sued, and it would cost money. And also that legislators do not enjoy debating those bills. And one senator, Senator Vickers in particular, when another abortion bill came in front of his committee, said, "How many times do we have to prove we're pro-life?" Which was, again, a unique statement from a senator. So Tina is going to tell you about another bill that we followed in detail and a little bit about one of our interviews. You're muted.
You're muted.
Tina, unmute.
I just said, according to our agenda, Vicki was going to do history and statistics next.
Nikki, you're muted.
It's contagious.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay, Vicki, who did the really critical part of, I think, our write-up, which is a history and
Absolutely.
status of abortion. We all learned a lot from that.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about history. So I'm just going to highlight on it because I hope that the rest of you that want to delve into this a little bit more will go to our study and read it. It is quite extensive and it is very interesting. So in the United States, abortion originally was legal in the country just before you felt the baby move, which is usually around 4 to 5 months. Abortion was widely practiced at that time and was primarily done by the use of herbs with the assistance of midwives and other female healers. Some of the earliest abortion laws actually were poison control laws because they were using herbs to induce abortion. So they had to make those herbs illegal. So, but in the by the late 19th century, most of the states started banning abortions, except in the to save the life or the health of the pregnant person. So the move to ban all of these abortions had a variety of reasons. One was part of a backlash of a growing women's rights movement, which advocated for voluntary motherhood. Even though this wasn't supported, this group didn't support the abortion, they did demand birth control, which in turn threatened the male dominance that was going on. So restricting the abortion was part of an effort to control women and to also confine them to the designed role of childbearing. So the other reason was that with all of the abortions that was happening in the past by midwives and everything, men kind of got the clue that this was a good way to make some money. So they decided to establish a medical profession to take over having childbirth from the midwives who they had condemned for performing abortions. So that's another monetary reason why they did what they did. When this happened and they did away with the abortions, there was still abortions being done. There's never not been a period of time when abortions have been done. But along with that, abortions were, you could still find providers, but mainly white women with a good income or a good method of being able to pay for the high price to get a safe provider to do your abortion, or being able for you to fly out of the country to be able to get an abortion. But that left a very disproportionate dilemma for women of color and people that were in poverty, because they didn't have those choices. So they were left at the mercy of questionable providers and also back alley unsanitary conditions or self-induced abortions. So, and they would sometimes use knitting needles, coat hangers to insert into their vaginas and their uterus. They would douche with strong solvents like lye, or they would swallow strong drugs or chemicals. Because of this, a lot of women died. Thousands of women were treated a year for complications for botched abortions and unsanitary self-induced abortions as well. And many of them died. We don't know how many people died, but in Chicago at a public hospital, they had a whole wing that actually was for women suffering from complications of abortion, of illegal abortion. That wing was usually always full. But there were some people that were really caring and dedicated to try and make illegal abortion safe. So they would risk their lives and their safety to provide safe abortions in clandestine, to treat people with complications and to help them find a safe provider. In 1996, a group of trained lay women called the Abortion Counseling Service of Chicago Women's Liberation Union. They created an underground feminist abortion service, and that was in 1969. For over 4 years, that group provided more than 11,000 first-term or second-term abortions with a safety record that would be comparable to today's health standards. In 1960, reproductive rights became a big priority. Women started talking about the first time they had abortions, their experience with the abortion. This started really bubbling up and made visible how many women, millions of people were willing to break the law and risk their lives to obtain an abortion or to help someone do so. The movement also connected abortion with gender equality. In 1967 to 1973, 14 states reformed and 4 states actually repealed the restrictive abortion laws. New York became the first state to actually allow abortions on demand through the 24 weeks of pregnancy. Hawaii, who had done this, legalized abortion earlier, allowed abortion up to 20 weeks, but only for residents of that state. While Washington, D.C. also allowed abortion. 2 other states joined in, and that was Alaska and Washington State, followed into that suit. So women who could afford to flock to the places where abortion was legal, feminists worked to help support, provide loans, and did referrals and fought to keep the prices down. But for every person that had managed to get to New York or the few places that did allow abortion, many more were left behind because of limited financial resources or mobility. So they sought illegal abortions. So on January 22, 1973, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down all existing criminal abortion laws in the landmark Roe V Wade decision. The court ruled that the people had a fundamental right to privacy, founded in the 14th Amendment concept of personal liberty. The court weighed in on the pregnant person's right to privacy against the state's interest in maternal and fetal life. Dividing pregnancy into 3 trimesters, the court held that the abortion decision must be left to the pregnant person to consult with her doctor during the first trimester. The state may regulate abortions in a way that is reasonably related to maternal health in the second trimester. And that during the third trimester, the state may regulate or prohibit abortion except when where necessary in appropriate medical judgment. And this was usually for the life and the health of the pregnant person. So the country was all excited about having abortion be legal, but there was also a lot of people that were very unhappy about it being made legal. So they started going to state legislatures to start restricting those bills. So let's go to the bills in Utah. So in 1973, when Roe v. Wade actually was passed, there were two bills. One passed, one failed. So to 1980 or to 1979, there was two bills each year that was presented, and three bills passed, and the rest of them failed. So there wasn't anything in 1980, but in 1981 there was five. Two passed and three failed. So then we had little onesie twosies from 1981 to 1997, and then we had one again, and then in 2002 we had two, and then we jumped in 2004, we had six. Two passed and four failed. So then we went along and we got down to 1920 or 1980, 2009, sorry, and we had six bills between that 2009 and 2011, and all those bills passed. So then we went to onesie twosies again, got down to 2019, and we have three bills presented and three bills passed. So all in all, 2020 was our big home run with abortion bills. We had 11 abortion bills presented, 7 passed, and 4 failed. This was when Senator Vickers made the statement that Nikki was talking about, because he was tired of the abortion bill. Aren't we all? So all total from 1973 to 2020, we had 95 bills, 39 of them passed, 36 of them failed. From 2004 to 2020, Senator Bramble sponsored or co-sponsored 12 of those bills. From 2016 or 2006, excuse me, and to 2014, Representative Paul Ray sponsored or co-sponsored 4 bills. After that, it was 3 or less that other legislators sponsored. One bill was vetoed by Governor Herbert, which in 2010, which was HB 12, which ran by Wimmer. And it was, the title of it was Criminal Homicide and Abortions Amendment. He came back with another bill the next year and passed HB 462, which was Criminal Homicide and Abortion Provision. And that bill passed. So coming back to 2021, and supposedly we're sick of all abortion bills. Apparently we're not, because we have 3 that's popped up in this year's legislation so far, and we're halfway through. One of the bills we do support, and that's HB 164, which basically, you've heard us talk about what you have to listen to this module that tells you all about the abortion, what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, all this kind of stuff. He wants to make it so it's a little bit easier for the woman to do that by having it on the website, and women being able to go in and access that on the website, rather than going into the health department or whatever provider she's going to have an abortion and do it all there. It would be easier if she just did that. That's all his bill does, is just make it so it's visible on a website. And they can still sign off on it if they've done it or they haven't done it or whatever. So, and you can see that on, I think, that you have access to see if it really and truly did happen. She did watch it. So that's one of the bills that, and we do actually support that bill. One of the bills is HB 253, which is the abortion amendment. And basically what that does is it modifies the informed consent provision. It provides modifies the abortion information module that's provided by the department, and it amends the provision relating to the viewing of the abortion information module. It amends the statistical reporting requirements relating to abortion. And this isn't entirely all bad because there isn't a lot of statistics in Utah about abortion. And so this is kind of a good side of the bill, but we still don't support the bill because it's not a good bill. And then it also provides a civil penalty for physicians who do not comply with the informed consent or provisions that are related to an abortion. And that civil penalty is a $50,000 fine. The other bill is HB 231, which is fetal transport restrictions. And this bill really bugs me because they are starting to throw miscarriages in with abortion. So now it's almost starting to feel like if you have a miscarriage, shame on you. You had a choice in that matter, and I don't think that's at all possible because my mom had 6 of them and they weren't her fault. So, but you can't transport a fetus across state lines or any kind of fetal tissue from a miscarriage or from an abortion. I don't know why we need that bill, but that's the bill. So those are the 3 bills that are up at the Hill now. They're still in the Rules Committee. They haven't come out. So that's pretty much it. I hope you'll read the rest of the study and read the history. And there's a lot on the internet that's still yet to be learned. So, yeah.
And may I suggest that no matter what you read, or if you read nothing else in our study, Vicki did create an amazing spreadsheet of all the bills in Utah. And you can take that out and have it with you wherever you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. Thank you very much, Vicki. Okay, Tina,
Okay,
let's hear
great.
about the bill. I really do apologize, Vicki, for leaving you out there.
Okay, I was interested in what was going on. So I figured you'd get to me sometime.
That's right. I am going to talk about Senate Bill 67, the disposition of fetal remains. That was part of the 2020 legislature, and it passed, and it's Utah law. It was the chief sponsor was a name that was familiar according to Vicki's list. The sponsor was Senator Curtis Bramble, Republican District 16, Utah and Wasatch counties. And the floor sponsor was Representative Carrie Ann Lisenby, Republican District 14 for Davis County. As I said in my introduction, I wanted to know why now is all of this coming in the amounts and the intensity that is going on with the Utah legislature. Well, in essence, Utah is riding the coattails of other states by copying language which has successfully passed for fetal burial bills. GOP-led legislatures have considered fetal burial bills in recent years as abortion opponents shifted away from a narrative of protecting women's health toward a fetal rights agenda. Some attempts have failed. In 2017, a federal judge blocked Arkansas's fetal burial law, and in 2018, a district judge blocked Texas' fetal burial law. But most notably, at least to me anyway, in 2019, the US Supreme Court upheld a certain provision of Indiana's fetal remains law, originally signed in 2016 by then Governor Mike Pence. Indiana's approved provision requires that fetal remains be buried or cremated instead of disposed of, as they term it, medical waste. Senator Bramble, in fact, throughout his floor debates, said that the Utah bill parallels the Utah Supreme Court approved Indiana language. So we are, in fact, copying some other legislatures and their legislation. Abortion opponents who support fetal burial say the requirements protect the dignity of human life, that's in quotes, and an argument rooted in the concept of fetal personhood, also in quotes. Abortion proponents say that burial or cremation of fetal tissue, when placed in terms of a human being or a person, continues to contribute to the shame and stigma that still surrounds abortion today. So the bill itself Bramble emphasized that his bill places the burden of dealing with fetal remains with medical providers, lessening the burden for the woman to only have to have a decision that's facilitated through a state-provided form. Provisions of HB 67 direct the medical facilities dealing with miscarried or aborted fetal remains to notify the woman of her options for fetal remain disposition, to provide for final disposition of fetal remains, and in the case of medical abortions, that they be notified that they can return those fetal remains to a care facility for disposition. In the case of abortion, notification of the woman's right to determine aborted fetal remains disposition needs to occur before the abortion. And of course, it also maintains, asks the medical providers to maintain all the forms and discussion and dispositions on record. So what I found most fascinating about this bill is a couple of areas that were highly debated and highly contested, and in a number of cases sought some compromise. One was initially, there was a concern with handing a form to a woman to decide disposition of the fetal remains right after a miscarriage or abortion. And that was concerning to a whole lot of women who testified. Women who had miscarried, including 2 state senators, said that being given a form to make a decision at that time could further the trauma after their miscarriage. That particular measure was later changed to allow the healthcare facility to deal with the disposition after 72 hours if no immediate decision was made in the interim. Another interesting debate focused around physicians and OBGYN organizations who opposed the bill on the grounds that the bill prescribed what, how, and when doctors speak to their patients about fetal remains dispositions. One physician argued that she and other doctors have established relationships and offer options already to their patients. They didn't need a script in order to do that. Bramble and Lisenby referred to fetal remains as unborn child, as we've mentioned before, unborn child, children's bodies, babies, regardless of gestation time. And they often interrupted to object when other speakers used terms such as product of conception, biologic tissue, or fetal tissue. Another area for debate was in Representative Lisenby calling the legislation a choice bill, with only 2 options, being cremation or burial at that time in the debates. Objections were that 2 choices were not really a choice because it was the state determining what those choices are. In a substitute bill, an additional option was later added and debated over besides cremation and burial. And this was proposed, as we talked before, about Representative Ward. His amendment allows the facility to dispose of biologic material if the patient does not choose cremation or burial within 72 hours. This option, as I said, was hotly debated, referred to committee, and eventually included in the final bill. The bill eventually passed and was signed into law on March 28, 2020.
Great. Thank you, Tina. Tina, do you want to talk about our meeting with the physicians from the University of Utah?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. Let me grab my notes here real quick. Dr. Turlock and Dr. Sanders, the committee meeting with the University of Utah professors and physicians, Dr. David Turlock and Dr. Jessica Sanders. With the legislation changing each year regarding abortions, we asked how an abortion is currently done. A woman seeking an abortion is traditionally seen at Planned Parenthood or the Wasatch Women's Clinic, of course, in coordination with their personal physician. The woman completes the state written and mandated online informational module. Turlock and Sanders reported that some module statements are not scientifically accurate, and they promote adoption and childbirth, which should not be a part of the state mandated medically informed consent. The patient also has to undergo a counseling session from their provider, online or in person, who reads from a state provided script. The patient is then required to sign the form saying she has received the required information. And you can kind of see how that's been morphing into some of this year's legislation bills. The patient then is required to wait 72 hours prior to visiting the abortion provider. At facility, blood tests are done, a health history taken, and an ultrasound is performed. Adherence to the fetal remains disposition law is also done at the provider's facility as well. Talking about medical abortions at 10 weeks, they told us that that involves 2 different medications and the procedure is not reversible. Aspiration abortion is an option, is an outpatient, procedure. If fetus is over 15 weeks, the standard of care is intravenous sedation, which now meets the state law that the fetus receives pain medication. Providers are accredited, are responsible for documenting the procedure, and are required to sign state forms as mandated by the law. We also discussed the challenge of doctors staying current on state laws, with them changing every year with state legislation. They told us that right now there's 4 hours of reproductive rights in the second year of medical school, and OBGYN residents receive 12 weeks of training. But it is difficult to stay on top of it, but those are kind of the framework or the timeframes in which they do receive the latest legislative updates. Turlock and Sanders also believe that the restrictions placed on abortion by state law does not cause women to reconsider their choice. Mandates may make abortion more difficult and costly, they say, but most women consider an abortion very seriously, and that state mandates don't change minds in their experience and in their view. They also talked about and believe that legislators are not well informed about women's circumstances where she chooses an abortion. Economic and parenting circumstances play large, Turlock and Sanders said, but often is not considered in terms of legislation and the mandates that the law provides. They say it's important to acknowledge that people have strong feelings about unborn life, but it's also important to consider the life and potential of a fully formed living woman. They reminded us that it's challenging to think critically and empathetically at the same time, particularly in regards to the patient and the laws being considered and ultimately mandated by the state regarding abortions. If they're here this evening, many, many thanks to both of you. It was informative. It helped us immensely with our study. Thanks to both Drs. Turlock and Sanders.
Thank you, Tina. Now, Kathy, and she'll be modest, but so I'm going to introduce her as our editor, which is the hardest part of the study. And Kathy just did a phenomenal job of I can't even say it, from everything from getting it all in one font to checking links and adding links, and certainly finding errors in what we had written and all that. So huge thanks to our editor. And if you all are considering us doing a study, or especially leading a study, pick your editor first, because a huge part of getting a good study out. Kathy's going to tell us a lot about our interviews with Planned Parenthood.
Thank you, Nikki. And I have to say it was a pleasure editing this. I learned a lot, I'll say that. While we did review anti-abortion websites, as Nikki said, we felt it was important to talk to Planned Parenthood of Utah because they are front and center, and of course, they are the ones who are being hit with all the bills and having to actually make them work. We met with Planned Parenthood of Utah's Carrie Galloway. She's the president and CEO. And Annabelle Scheinberg, who is Vice President of Learning and Partnerships, on November last year. We talked about the doctored videos that appeared in 2015 and dramatically changed the way Planned Parenthood and our legislature interacted. You might remember the videos alleging that Planned Parenthood sold body parts. Planned Parenthood successfully sued, but that brought an end to what had been, they called, a peaceful coexistence with the legislature. Since then, there's been much misinformation about abortion as abortion opponents ramp up their rhetoric. They say Planned Parenthood promotes risky behaviors, covers up sexual abuse, and all kinds of things. Planned Parenthood, in the meantime, has 8 health centers in Utah. The Metro Center on 10th East and 160 South is the only one that actually provides abortions. Wasatch Women's Center provides first trimester abortions, though. Planned Parenthood provides what I think it was Nikki who talked about the consent class. That's the video that's mandated for the 74-hour waiting period. They try to make this as easy for the woman who's coming in as possible. Obviously, all of these rules that one has to go through make it very difficult to actually come up with an abortion. Until last year, when Title X money was taken away, Planned Parenthood was a steward of federal money to make sure that the rights to family planning, sex education, and even state contracts for public health were available in Utah. In a way, we're lucky that the legislature doesn't micromanage how the laws are carried out, because that allows Planned Parenthood to work closely with the health department and the Office of Education. And both of them are actually very helpful to Planned Parenthood in getting all of this information out. In Utah, we have only, we have 2,200 abortions a year. That may sound like a lot, but it's actually much lower than other states. It almost seems as though Planned Parenthood's primary function is bringing lawsuits and defending against burdensome and unnecessary laws. That's because that is a large part of their job. The whole thing is costly, but it appears mostly to taxpayers. For instance, the state spent $80,000 for expert witnesses on the 18-week case. If that case settles and Planned Parenthood of Utah wins, which it's likely they will, the state will owe Planned Parenthood $200,000. One abortion bill is being heard now in the Supreme Court with 6 pending certification. Of course, here in Utah, Senator Dan McKay passed a trigger bill, I believe, which also Nikki mentioned, to prohibit most abortions if the High Court rules against Roe v. Wade. That was basically, we had several conversations with Planned Parenthood. They were absolutely wonderful in providing us amazing information. I'd also recommend you go to their website. They have a lot on there, including videos as well as written information. But thanks to both of them for joining us. Okay.
Thank you, Kathy. You know, I want to sort of, first of all, encourage you all to give us some questions, statements. Before I do a conclusion on a couple of subjects, We do have a question and a statement on the fetal remains bill from Kathy Adams. She's asked, I'm going to read her statement. First, her question, what was the point of the bill restricting fetal remains crossing state lines? Did it have something to do with stem cells? Tina, you want to answer that, and then I'll read Kathy's.
Actually, the one that's restricting cross state lines is the new one.
Oh, that's
Yes.
Acton's bill.
That's Acton's bill. Yeah.
Vicki, do you know about that one?
Since the bill is being held in the rules, they haven't, there isn't anything that indicates in the language of the bill what the specific reasoning is. I don't think we're going to know that until she actually gets to testify on the bill as to the reason why. It just stops at not being able to transport the fetuses, and that the mortuaries would have to give her a certificate if it was going to be transported out of state to be buried. Those kinds of things. Doesn't address the why we need this.
I think part of that bill is so that fetal remains are not used for medical research.
And I would agree with that, but
Yeah.
I don't know that. It
Yeah,
doesn't
we
say
don't-
that in the bill.
And sent out of state in order to do that. Yeah.
Right, right.
Just my personal opinion, it's probably not constitutional, but I can't imagine that it's enforceable. So,
It's gonna be a long time. We'll wait a minute.
then I want to read a statement that Kathy made. The pathologist at the committee meeting of the 2020 fetal remains law rebutted all the supposed facts Bramble brought up. The three physicians, including one or two OBGYNs, even the ones with religious objections, said Bramble's law was wrong and would interfere with the doctor-patient relationship. After it was passed into law, I texted Bramble and said, congratulations, your bill successfully pits the fetus against the woman, which is kind of what Tina said. Trying to protect the fetus kind of takes away from the agency of a live, functional woman.
Thanks to Kathy for adding those extra details. Those are all accurate. And yeah, so thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
adding that extra detail.
And I would just say, in my experience, the physicians that testify, and a lot of physicians who do testify in committee, are just ignored. The legislators sit quietly, maybe ask one little question and say, thank you very much. But no matter how many items they bring up, like the state should not provide a script to me when I'm dealing with my patients, it's really just ignored. And Kathy Beely, this is for you. Are there any Utah abortion providers outside of Salt Lake County? Do you know the answer to that?
Yeah, no, they're not. Planned Parenthood is it.
Okay,
I'm sure there are illegal abortion clinics.
yes. All right. I think we have a couple more.
Someone asked about the position, our league position.
Yes. Does the LWV Utah have a position on abortion? And if so, what is it? We have a national position on abortion. It's in the study. It's basically that anyone has the right to privacy in a healthcare decision, and abortion is part of healthcare. So whether it's a man considering a vasectomy, or a couple working to have children, having infertility treatments or discussions, or a woman considering an abortion, the league position is it's a private decision between the couple, or the man and the woman, and their doctor, and the state, the government should not be involved. It's in the study. It's kind of a long position, but that I think I stated it correctly. If anybody wants to help me out or disagree.
No, I think you captured the essence of it. Nikki, yes.
Okay. And so we don't have a specific Utah position. We are agreeing with the national position. We have a question from Catherine Willer. Was the removal of the constitutional note requirement for proposed legislation related to the legislature's ever-present need to restrict abortion? I don't know the answer to that because I don't totally understand the question. The constitutional notes, if you're not familiar with that, when the legislators propose a bill, they get a legal review from the legal staff at the legislature, and they will tell the legislators if what's proposed might be declared unconstitutional. And the important thing about that is they will probably get a lawsuit then, and then as Kathy said, it will cost the state money. I'm not sure which bill had the constitutional note removed, but I know the bill that proposed abortion at 18 weeks did have a constitutional note on it, and they did get sued. Okay, well, if you have more questions, oh, here's another one. Any statistics on wealthy families who can afford to go out of state for abortion versus those who cannot and go through all this rigmarole? To my knowledge, no. I don't know how you would get that data.
And
Which brings,
let me just say that Planned Parenthood is really very good at working with women. So they are helping women through an abortion in a legal way. They also, as you know, have been front and center on sex ed, which probably the legislature needs more than women. But yeah, it's really, we really depend highly on Planned Parenthood for good information. If you're going to have an abortion, they'll help you here.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, good point. Let me see, I know we're.
So I know we're, okay, Peggy, Catherine Fitzgerald would like to speak, if you could help
That
her.
would be great.
It'll just take a minute here. Technology.
That's not Catherine.
Yes.
Oh,
You're muted, Catherine.
Okay, I got it. I just want to say what a fabulous job I think you did as a panel on this study. Your organization was brilliant. I know how hard it is to have all that information in front of you and figure out how to organize it so it makes sense. And starting with the history and then following particular bills, particular active bills, I think was really, the organization was wonderful. It was easy to follow. Everything made sense. And I want to add that I admire your patience in sitting through all those awful discussions. It must have driven you nuts. And I just admire this study, and I want to thank you all.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine.
We have a couple more questions. Can we say more about telemedicine abortions? Anybody want to jump into that? We didn't study that particular subject in detail. Maybe that gives me a lead in to something I want to plug, and it's this book. Let me get it in the right camera here. The Turnaways Study. It's by Dr. Diana Green Foster. It is something that's been needed for many years. It's a study over 10 years of 1,000 women who requested an abortion. This is across the country. Some were given an abortion and some were denied usually because they were too far along in their pregnancy. There is a wealth of information in that book. And it's actually, they've published many peer-approved studies in medical journals about everything from what happens to the children of a woman who already has children and needs an abortion. And by the way, 60% of women requesting an abortion already have at least one child. So again, the stereotype of a 17-year-old girl who unexpectedly gets pregnant and her mother takes her for an abortion is just that, a stereotype. And most women who need an abortion already have children. And they, there are a lot of examples in the book of women who can't, and maybe it's a couple, a family who have 2 children, they both work, they're barely making it financially, they just can't, they don't have the physical or financial resources to cope with another child. That would be more likely to be a woman looking for an abortion than you might think. So I do want to encourage you. Now, what I did with this book, I bought 2 copies and I mailed one to my state senator, Todd Weiler, and I mailed another one to my state representative, Melissa Ballard, and just told them, if you must legislate on abortion, please use facts. There's a lot of good stuff in there. And let's talk about lobbying. So you may think, why do we make people go through all this rigmarole to have an abortion? Let's just stop it. What do you say to your state legislator when an abortion bill is proposed? And I went to a Planned Parenthood Saturday morning training, which was well worth the time. And here are a few clues about talking to your particular legislator about some of these aggressive anti-abortion bills. One is, it's not about women, it's about people. So if a woman needs an abortion, there may be a lot of other people involved. It could be a husband or a boyfriend, her other children, her parents, her siblings. There are a lot of people involved when there's an unwanted pregnancy. So instead of saying it's a woman's right to privacy, it's actually a person's right to privacy in a healthcare decision. If you're talking to a Utah legislator, they believe in Utah values, whatever those are, but they don't believe in government overreach. And again, in my mind, it brings up something like a vasectomy. I don't think they require men to watch a video before they kill all of those fertile sperm. So there is government overreach, and they only seem to like government overreach when it involves a woman's unwanted pregnancy. It is healthcare. Women don't have abortions for fun. And so protecting everyone's right to the healthcare that they and their physician decide they need is important. Again, Utah is very pro-family. If a woman has 2 children and her husband is not there, or the father of the children, let's say, is not there, is it going to do those 2 children any good if the woman adds another child to that family, which more than half of women who request an abortion are struggling financially. They don't have the financial resources to cope with that 2nd child or 3rd child or whatever. So if you prevent an unwanted child from being born, there is some protection to the other children in that family. The last thing is to point out there are much better ways to reduce abortion than making sure a woman doesn't fast forward through a video. The first one is comprehensive sex education, so that men and women, boys and girls, understand what causes babies, and our legislature understands. You know, a girl can get pregnant as soon as she starts menstruating, which can be age 12 or 13. So it's putting sex education at the end of high school may not do it. This really almost needs to be a preteen, age-appropriate sex education to keep women who just don't understand the process from getting pregnant. The second one is available and affordable contraception. And that means contraception with no questions asked, that you don't have to go talk to your mother who may not understand at all why you need that abortion, or you don't need to find a missing parent or whatever. That if you're having sexual relations, you should be able to get contraception and you should be able to afford it. So those are some of the lobbying points that Planned Parenthood recommended that we use when we talk to our legislators. Another thing that came up in the town club discussion of this subject, if your legislator already supports the choice of a woman to have abortion, they still need your input, because they need to be able to stand up in committee and say, I heard from multiple constituents that this is not a good bill to pass. So yes, if you're Senator Bramble's constituent, it'd be great to tell him why he should just find another topic to focus on. But if your legislator is a pro-choice legislator, again, tell them why you support or you don't support a certain bill. And I always use Ray Ward, who's such a moderating voice in some of the more extreme bills. He's from Bountiful. He's not my representative, but I've often supported his position just by an email or even a donation, because he's just such a wise voice on the whole subject. The final thing, and then I want to go to some more questions, is the legislators really listen to personal testimony. Now, if you had an abortion and you don't have regrets and it was the right thing for you at the right time, it's wonderful if you will go tell the legislators that in committee. It's a very hard thing to do. There's a stigma about abortion, and it's hard to testify in a committee anyway, and on a sensitive subject like abortion, it's very, very hard. But we do not have that kind of testimony very, very rarely. And we had one league member who did testify. She had had an abortion for the right reasons and had no regrets. And we really appreciate her, and the league would give you all the support you need for doing that. But again, it's a difficult thing, but they do listen to personal testimony.
And even if you don't testify, you should talk to your legislator, because they will testify for you. You know, we hear that all the time. The legislators say, my constituent called me, I heard this. So there are ways around that. Nikki, I also just want to tell you that I did put the position in the chat feature here.
Great,
So.
thank you, thank you. So we still have a little bit of time.
There are a few more questions. Did you want to look
go
at
ahead,
those?
Kathy.
No, you go ahead and
Okay.
read them.
do you perhaps have concerns that teaching consent in school sex ed courses, though out of committee, close vote 6-5, may generate similar discussions? I'm a little confused on that bill, the one that is going through the legislature now that wants to teach consent. I think many children in Utah need to understand the basics of sexual interaction before they can learn consent. So I think that bill it's a good bill because there's more consent, there's more to consent than just sexual intercourse. For example, there's consent to even get in a car with somebody or go with a stranger. There's a lot of consent things that kids do need to learn when they're 3 or 4 years old, really. I think it's always good to make the legislators think about sex in general, because they're pretty ignorant on some subjects, particularly contraception. So I don't know. Do you guys have any thought about that question? Are you familiar with that bill? I'm not totally familiar with that.
Not either.
Okay, and there's another question. How did loss of Title X funding due to the Trump administration's action impact Planned Parenthood's ability in Utah to provide contraceptive services to low-income women and uninsured people? Did Utah see an uptick in unwanted pregnancies and abortions during this period? What's the outlook for the Biden administration restoring Title X funding, Title X funding? Kathy, they talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think there are 3 questions in that question. So the first one, yeah, it affected them. It's a gag rule, basically. But Planned Parenthood is very good at speaking. So they know how to, I won't say get around it. They know how to speak logically and clearly to women. So I don't know that there are any statistics on whether there was an uptick in abortions during that time.
There are none.
But, you know,
Too early.
Yeah, we don't have good statistics on that. And as far as the Biden administration is concerned, we're going to have to wait and see. I think he's more focused on healthcare right now in general than he is on abortion. Although he is putting, I just heard today, putting judges in places as fast as he can.
Yeah, I think the Biden administration, this is not as high on their agenda. They really want to get the pandemic under control. I think, although, didn't they change the Helms rule already? The Helms rule is the one that forbids us to give foreign aid to countries that that allow abortion or that promote abortion. I thought they already changed that. Most Democratic administrations overturned that, and then the Republican administrations put it back.
Nikki,
So
there is a question also regarding legislation from anonymous attendee at 7:33. Putting forward aggressive bills to make men fully accountable for pregnancies, as well as any medical expenses and childcare expenses. Is that Kitchen's legislation? You want to talk a little bit about that?
That is, yes, there's a bill on, you all may know more than I do, but it's a bill to make men, the biological father, pay half the cost of the pregnancy and related expenses. And of course, there are already child support laws. Again, it's a great bill, I think, although it may make women encourage women to have the baby, have the unwanted, carry the unwanted pregnancy to term, even if they can't support the baby later, but the intention is good. Again, those are very hard to enforce. You just have to think, how much does it cost in enforcing that versus just making sure the woman's expenses are covered by the state? The cost benefit, it may be a lot cheaper to make sure all pregnant women have all the medical care they need affordably than try to track down a biological father and try to get the money to pay half the pregnancy costs. I mean, just think of the burden on the woman to even say how much the pregnancy cost. If she had to quit her job 2 months early, how much did that cost her? If she relies on tips, I mean, you can see that it sounds good, but sometimes it costs more in enforcement than the money you actually get back. And do you think it's going to stop a man from impregnating a woman, thinking, oh, I might have to pay half the cost later? I don't, maybe. The legislature does want to make fathers pay. It's just very hard to do that from the state policing agencies. Do we have any other questions?
I also put something in the chat about the Helms rule
Oh, good.
from a story recently. Of course, it was one of his memorandums, but you can read it there.
Yeah. Okay. What I want to say one more thing that occurred to me when Vicki was talking. Representative Lisenby, who's very anti-abortion, very strongly anti-abortion, wants the state to state clearly that they believe life begins at conception. And many of the bills from legislators like Representative Chris Jansen, Representative Lisenby, Senator Kennedy, really would like a clear statement that life, from the legislator, that life begins at conception. I think these legislators, when they start with that mindset, it's very hard to talk to them about abortion, about why that doesn't work for some women. So I did want to say that she clearly stated that in the House discussion on that one bill.
I think Planned Parenthood said it best, that the legislators are not so much pro-life as they are pro-birth.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And that's another thing to point out. One of the discussion questions that we put together was, if the legislature really wants to prevent abortions, how can they do that? And we've talked a little bit, sex education, contraceptives. Another one that people don't think about, but the example I used of a family who just can't deal with another child is childcare. Maybe families would not consider a pregnancy unwanted if they had 2 children already, or 3 children, or 4 children, as it can happen in Utah, and they had good childcare for those children. Maybe they would welcome another child. So affordable childcare, affordable medical care, all those things can help reduce abortions. And again, not vaginal ultrasounds, not forcing a woman to watch a 10-minute video. I don't think all the legislators truly understand that that is not going to prevent abortions. As Vicki said, abortions have been around since men and women have been around. And whether or not they're legal, many, I mean, I grew up when abortions weren't legal, but I was lucky I didn't need one, but some of my friends certainly did. And it wasn't legal, but they were having abortions. And I think that's true for anyone my age. And when I got married, I was lucky because even in 1970 or 1964, when I got married, you had to be married to get contraception. So I was excited because I could go to the doctor and say, I just got married. Now I can get birth control pills. I mean, like I say, I was lucky. Okay, I think we have ended our conversation. Again, I really appreciate everybody who attended and the good questions. And you can always send us an email personally to any one of us and ask further questions or give us some more ideas. But thanks everyone for attending. And thank you, Donnie.
Yes, and thank you to Nikki and Kathy and Vicki and Tina. That was a wonderful study. So much good information, the historical factors. We just learned so much tonight, and we really appreciate all the time and effort that went into the study. It really shows. And thank you also to the people that attended and to those who participated. And I second everything that Catherine Fitzgerald said. It was a wonderful, wonderful study. So thank you. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Donnie. Thanks for
Thank you,
holding it.
Donnie.
And everybody be safe. We don't have to drive home, but be safe.
Yay.
And thank you for coming.
Thanks, Donnie. Bye-bye, everybody.
Good night,
Bye.
all.